In previous lessons, we've really worked on collecting Revit elements a variety of ways. We've done this through categorical selection, through individual instance selection, and through dictionaries. We've also updated elements in the sense that we removed unplaced rooms in a previous lesson. In this lesson, we're going to look at how to actually modify Revit elements by updating their parameter values. By the end of this lesson, you're going to know how to set Revit parameter values in Dynamo with out-of-the-box nodes. You're also going to reinforce your understanding of data types. As I've mentioned a few times, data types are very important to remember as you're working with Revit elements in Dynamo. Anytime you're working in Dynamo, really. So with that in mind, we'll jump right into Revit and we'll get to updating some Revit elements. Alright, once again we are in the advanced sample model. This is a model that's out of the box that's included with your Revit install. Just for reference, it is included in the dataset just in case you need it, but it should be available in your Revit install out of the box. We'll go ahead and open up Dynamo from the Manage tab and the Visual Programming panel. For this example, we are going to start a new blank workspace. We're not going to click New though, we're going to reinforce that thinking of using the template. So we're going to go ahead and start with this Dynamo template in the samples folder that we created in a previous lesson. If you don't have that created, you can revisit that lesson, or you can just open the Dynamo template in the sample files for this lesson. Those are always available to you. With that open, we're going to go ahead and do a Save As process. And I'm going to title this 5.1-working. You can title it whatever you'd like. Awesome. So now we have a new blank workspace started from our template. Another thing to keep in mind is I did save the template in manual run mode. So that is down in the bottom left corner. It says manual. We're going to go ahead and switch that to automatic. Alright, so now that we're in automatic run mode, we need to go ahead and collect some elements. So in this example, we're going to do a few review things at the beginning. We're going to collect the rooms in our model. We're going to get their names from them. We're going to convert them all to uppercase, and then we're going to set it back to the model. As you can see, all the room names in this model are initial case, so capital C cafeteria and so on. Let's say you have an office standard of capitals for these kind of things. Updating that with Dynamo is very doable and a great use case, so that's what we're going to build. As you may recall, in order to collect Revit elements, that is located under the Revit section and the Selection subsection. Within the section, we have access to our All Elements of Category node that collects all placed instances of an element in the Revit model, so we'll place that now. And we also have our Categories node. Our Categories node is a drop-down node, and it does let us type in it and search for things like rooms. Once again, this should all be review from our previous lessons. I'm going to make this connection, and we'll see that we have all of our rooms collected. In this case, let's go ahead and select these nodes, the categories and all elements of category. We'll press Ctrl G on our keyboard to group them. We'll change it to the purple color for input, and we'll change the title to collect and the description to rooms in our model. Awesome. Good time to save. And with that, we've already collected all of our rooms. Anytime we're wanting to work with an element and extract data from it, we need to think about a few things. We need to think about what we're working with and what data we want to get at. With that in mind, if I come into Revit and I select a room, I will see that I have a parameter name of name. That's what we're going to be targeting in this case. So let's go ahead and do that now. Just like our previous lessons, rooms are an element in Revit, so they inherit from the base class of element. Element is the underlining object type of all elements in Revit. So pretty much everything's an element, but not everything's a room, for instance. So we'll navigate to elements, plural, element singular, and we have our action category in here. Within this category, we have a get parameter value by name node. Once again, this is a review based on previous lessons. We'll connect our room elements into the element input, and now we need to fulfill this parameter name. How might you think we do that at this point? a string node, or could we use a code block once again? In this case, we'll go ahead and double click for a code block, type quote, capital N, name, quote, and once you click outside, we now have a string. Once again, this is review based on how we collected these previously. We'll connect that to our parameter name, and we now have a whole bunch of room names available to us. In this case, we'll go ahead and group these objects. I'll make this green. The title of that group says calculations, but I like to use that for things that are querying as well. That might be a better title, so that might be one of those changes you can make to your own version of this. Get room names. We'll go ahead and remove the description for now. And there we have it. Good time to save once again. One thing to keep in mind is everything in Revit has a name property on it. If we navigate into this element category, down into the query section, we will notice a name node available to us. You might ask yourself, why don't we use that name node instead of this get parameter value by name? Let's go ahead and see what it does. Place it now, connect our rooms to the element.name, and we'll see that it's still working at this point. This is extracting that name of that room, so you could use this node. In previous versions of Dynamo and Revit, you might see that this says the room name plus the room number. The internal name of a Revit room is the name and the number. So more often than not, when I know what parameter I'm looking at specifically, I will use the get parameter value by name node. So there is something to keep in mind there. If you're looking at parameters, you want to be very specific to the parameter that you're getting. At any point, this element name could differ, so that's one thing to keep in mind. Alright, so now we have all of our room names. We're dealing with a data type at this point of string. So if we want to make this all uppercase, we can do a few things here. We can navigate to our library and search for upper and see what kind of comes out. At this point, we have a few modifiers for our string element. If we click on that modify text, it will take us to the portion in the library that's located. In this case, it's under the string subcategory in the library. That's because we're doing an operation on string elements. Should start to make sense. That's that object-oriented part of these things. We have a few options in here. We have to lower, to upper, change case, which provides an option to use upper or lower. So there are a few options in here. There's even a to-title version of this, which is pretty cool. Let's go ahead and place the change case node, and we'll place the to lower and the to upper, just to compare the differences in these. So as you can see, the change case node has another input of a boolean to convert it to uppercase true or false for lowercase. This is nice because it's a dual purpose node, so it really helps out if we have a person who wants everything lowercase, for instance, maybe. Sometimes that happens, I guess. Or you can hard code it to be lowercase or uppercase all the time. In this case, we'll keep the change case with the upper input. Our first input is a string element. Our get parameter value by name is currently outputting strings. We can confirm that by using an object type node once again. I use object type a lot when I'm starting to understand what a graph's doing. So we can see that we're working with strings. We'll delete that. We know that that input matches. Our upper takes a boolean. So if you just right click in the canvas and search for boolean, you're going to find something that makes sense. Plug that in. And we are on run automatic, so it is going to make changes live. If we toggle it to true, it'll go to uppercase. Nothing's happened in Revit quite yet though. Why is that? That's because at this point, we've started to modify it, but we're basically hitting escape. That's kind of the way to think about it. We're not committing that change to Revit at this time. We need to tell Dynamo and Revit, I want to make the change, which results in an undo in Revit. So we got to work out that logic as well. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead, we'll double click on the title of this boolean node, and we'll say true for upper. That way, the next person knows what this toggle does. We'll go ahead and hit Control G to group it. We'll name this input, and we'll make it purple for user inputs. Awesome. So now we have that saved. I'm going to save our graph, and we are converting these to uppercase at this time. So in the event of wanting to update Revit elements, we do need to navigate back to the Revit category, the element subcategory, and the element singular subcategory. In the action category, we have our get parameter value by name node that we've been using this whole time in these last few lessons. We also have a set parameter by name node in there as well. Let's place that now. Hovering on the description of this node, it tells you that it sets one of the element's parameters, and the inputs are an element, a parameter name, and a value. So this node will do what we want, and we feed in the modified value. One thing to keep in mind is we are updating elements that we're actively collecting. So I mentioned in an earlier lesson that we will switch to manual run mode at some point. Right now's that time. The reason is because this categories and all elements of category collector is collecting rooms every time something happens in the Revit model. So if we were to tile Dynamo and change a wall or something like that, we'll see that Dynamo does run and refresh. So you can kind of see that on my screen. That's important to keep in mind, and a really good thing to know as a Dynamo user, how Dynamo thinks and how it's connected to Revit. If we were to feed this in, there's a good chance that it keeps on looping and we're stuck in what's called an endless loop in code. And that's no good. You don't want to do that in your Revit model, especially if you're changing elements. And if you're in a work shared model, it gets even crazier. So pretty much anytime I'm actually setting parameters to Revit elements, I will go ahead and navigate down to the left and toggle to manual run mode. So we'll do that now, and we'll have to press run or F5 on our keyboard to be able to commit these changes. In this case, this is our modified value, the uppercase names. Our parameter name, we actually already have this name defined in this code block, so we can reuse that output for this input. That's always really nice to do as well. Another feature available in Dynamo is the ability to clean up these wires a bit. If you hover on a wire, you are able to pin the wire with this pin icon and kind of make it navigate around other nodes. It's a really nice way to keep your graph tidy. Kind of a good thing to practice. All right, so we have those connected, the parameter name and the value. Now for the element, we want to be very specific as to what we select. And this is going to be our originally collected elements. Plug those in now as well. In this case, we'll go ahead and group the change case node and the set parameter by name node with Control G on the keyboard. We'll change this to orange because orange does indicate changes to Revit according to our template. And we'll title this set names. And we'll add the description of set names to rooms uppercase. Great, so we have that completed as well. You will see that our set parameter by name node has not ran yet because we haven't pressed run. So no changes have been made quite yet. Let's go ahead and save and collapse our library before we make this change. And I'll just tile my Dynamo window next to my Revit window, so that way we can see both when we hit run. So at this point, our graph's complete. Let's go ahead and press run in our bottom left corner of our Dynamo window. You can also hit F5 on your keyboard if you'd like. And we'll see the changes happen live in Revit. All of our room names in our entire Revit model have been converted to uppercase, just like that. What's really great is we can now save this graph, reuse it on any project we want, and it all just works. You also have that option in there still to change it to false for lowercase. Try that now. Once we run that, it indicates a style of lowercase for all the room names, and it just works as well. If you were to add in a title case node, you can also have a third option for title case. So maybe that's something to try on your own. Do an option for lower, upper, or title. That'd be pretty interesting to try to do. So I'll go ahead and convert it back to upper. And if we minimize Dynamo, we will notice that we have an undo for each time we ran the graph as well. So really interesting, when we're making those changes, we do get an undo within Revit to be able to change our mind if we want to. That does not apply if we have an endless loop going and we kind of get stuck. That's always kind of tough to deal with. So with that in mind, we are now setting parameters, specifically room names, with a set parameter by name node. Set parameter by name is a node that you're going to be very familiar with as you build out Dynamo graphs. The most important things to keep in mind are: what elements are you feeding, what parameter name are you trying to set, and what values are you feeding. You always want to make sure those values match the data type that you're getting with your get parameter value by name node. So that's how you start to figure these things out. If I were to feed in a value, if I double click for a number and type in 1, and I feed this into my value and hit run, we are going to get an error in Dynamo. It's the error that we've seen before where it says the parameter storage type is not a number. That's how we start to know what we need to look at. In this case, we're feeding it the wrong data type. Always, always, always check what your data type is, and even place the object type node just in case you're curious what you're working with. So with that complete, you now know how to update parameter values in Revit with Dynamo after you've tweaked the data a bit in Dynamo. In our case, we converted room names to uppercase. Another example that we're going to use similar strategies is we're going to add a prefix to the view names in the model. So that's another one to keep an eye out for in the next lessons. With that complete, you have a concept of setting parameters in Revit with Dynamo, and you've reinforced your understanding of data types.